Hello, sweet listeners. Thanks for tuning in to the NetSuite podcast. I'm your host, Kendall Fisher, and on this episode, I'm chatting with George Ploss, Director of the NetSuite Business Accelerator. Now, if you haven't heard about our all-new Business Accelerator yet, then you're in the right spot. That's exactly what we'll be talking about today. NetSuite was founded with a mission to help entrepreneurs unlock business growth. And more than 2 decades and 28,000 customers later, we've never wavered from that mission. The NetSuite Accelerator expands on that, helping entrepreneurs and leaders from diverse communities build successful businesses with unified information they need to achieve their vision. George actually came up with the idea for the program, which is not surprising considering his long history of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, which we'll touch on in this conversation. But more than his personal dedication, George's inspiration stems from powerful data around entrepreneurs and startups from diverse communities and the value and impact they have. George explains how NetSuite will help these businesses gain greater access to the processes, best practices, guidance, and technology required to achieve the kind of sustainable growth that only comes from having visibility and control over their businesses. He describes the kinds of businesses that are a right fit for the program, how we're identifying them, and how he hopes to see this evolve over time with sustainable intentionality and the goal of continuing to help businesses from all communities grow and succeed. Stay tuned because this is an episode you won't want to miss.
You're listening to the NetSuite podcast, where we discuss what's happening within NetSuite, why we're doing it, and where we're heading in the future. We'll dive into the details about the software and the people at NetSuite who are behind all the moving parts. We'll also feature customer growth stories, discussing the ups and downs of running a company and how one integrated system can help your business continue to scale.
Hi, George. Thanks so much for joining us on the NetSuite podcast. And I'm so excited to get into NetSuite's all-new Business Accelerator program. But I think it's super important to give our listeners some insight into the person behind that. And it is, of course, you, George. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing you a few times and, being on meetings and stuff with you. And I know diversity, inclusion, and equity has always been so important to you. So tell us about the things and experiences that shaped that. Let's start with your career journey leading up to Oracle.
Yeah. First off, Kendall, thank you for having me and allowing me an opportunity to talk about this.
Of course.
So my journey in my career in Oracle, I was a diversity hire. I was part of a diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring program on the Oracle side called Operation Forward March. Mm-hmm. And it was a program that was spearheaded to bring in 33 solution consultants who are veterans and to demo different Oracle products. And so my job was to demo Oracle Fusion and Oracle Project Portfolio Management and Oracle Human Capital Management.
So you mentioned that you're a veteran. You got to tell us about that. What you were in the armed forces. What did you do?
Yeah, so I spent 9 years in the Marine Corps. Most of it was in the infantry. And then the latter half of the Marines, I spent in what's called civil affairs, where I would train. My technical title was the Ground Operations Training Chief, and I would train Marines to deploy to environments like Indonesia, Ethiopia, the Philippines, so they can help build up civil and economic infrastructure to counter bad ideas and bad actors across the world.
Well, that's going to play into our conversation here as we get into the accelerator program. I'm sure there's some experience there that definitely plays into that. So you were hired at Oracle, and remind me, what was your first role again?
I was a solution consultant for Oracle Fusion.
And then where did you go from there? How did your career sort of develop?
Yeah, so I had a really wonderful mentor and manager. His name was Mike Hitz, and for the first 2 years, I was demoing Oracle Fusion, and then someone named Lori Brady, who's our global vice president of internal recruiting, reached out to me and asked me if I would consider a role in diversity, equity, inclusion as a Veterans Affairs program manager for recruiting. And I was delighted and humbled because, she said that We want more veterans. We want to help the organization bring more veterans in, who who are like you, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and this is a market that we don't. This is a recruiting market that we don't know about, and we know that you're not a recruiter, but you do have a sales background. And so yeah, so I took that role. I learned really quickly how veterans. Uh, and the importance of veterans played into the overall diversity, equity, inclusion recruiting strategies of all of Oracle.
Yeah. I mean, so what was kind of your role? Like, how did you help shape that program?
Yeah, so so it was just two of us for all of North America, and my job was to figure out which organizations to partner with at the like veteran service organizations, both large and small,
Right.
and to figure out which ones are going to have the best impact on our recruiting pipeline.
Yeah.
So, for example, you've heard of Hiring Our Heroes and Recruit Military. Those are partnerships that I took over
Wow.
and or created, but then also things like the organizations like the Texas Workforce Commission, or smaller organizations like the Microsoft Software and Systems Academy, which basically is just a academy that trains veterans uh, on basis in the last 6 to 12 months of their military career to give them certifications, and that we were to hire for. So
Wow. I mean, again, this is all like I've heard bits and pieces of your story,
yeah,
but to hear this now, to know exactly what's gone on with the accelerator and how you've really helped lead that. You've really not helped. You've led that. It's all coming together for me now, George. So
yeah, yeah.
that's really really cool to hear. You mentioned, and I know you could probably talk about this for hours on end, but you
Mhm.
mentioned the impact that veterans can have on the workforce. Can
Right.
you just give us, like, if you could summarize that in a couple sentences, what is that impact?
Yeah. Well, put it simply, the impact is positive, and the
Yeah.
impact is gainful for any organization that hires veterans
Mhm.
in mass. And it's because veterans, just like people of other diverse communities, have a very different lived experience than civilians.
Mhm.
And so when you're trying to solve market problems and you're trying to solve dynamic problems, you want fresh approaches. And so if you take people who have the same education, same background, from the same place, and you put them in the room to solve a problem, they're going to come out with the same solution. And
Yeah.
so veterans are just like any other community, are they're very skilled. We get things done, but then also we know what it's like to strategically plan and then also execute. And
Right.
having operators like that in your organization really gives you a competitive edge, whether you're on the sales side, operation sides, human resources, et cetera. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Thanks for that. Again, I know we could probably go, that could be a whole podcast in itself, and it will be one day, but yeah, I appreciate you. I just want to make sure I hit on that. What would you say you're most proud of in your journey with the veterans program?
There's this veteran who works for NetSuite. His name is Adam Brady.
Mhm.
And I was transitioning into my role as a solution consulting academy manager here in Austin. And my last event was at a recruit military event here in Austin, Texas.
Mhm.
And I met Adam at a hiring event. He was walking past, he was an Army warrant officer. And I sparked up a conversation with him. And he didn't know what Oracle was, he didn't know what NetSuite was. And uh, he was really skeptical because he thought that we were going to underemploy him and not value his military career. And
Mm.
I told him that my job is to value your service, both intrinsically, but then also value it in the form of what role do we have that is commensurate with your skills and your education.
Right.
And now he's a consulting practice manager for Oracle Consulting on the customer success side. And I look at him, and whenever I speak to him, which is frequently, he always really makes me like turn red and like real bashful, just because I like to think that every other veteran I help bring to the organization has had a similar success and or a similar impact because he's paying it forward. And
Yeah.
that makes me feel really good for two reasons.
Yeah.
One, because also like we're a business, and I always lean into that. And so we don't, we do good, and our good should also should have a net gain for us. It should provide a return for our shareholders, for our stakeholders, and should move our organization forward. And so I look at him and I look at what we're doing, and I think that he is just an example of the good, the small good that I've done in the overall organization.
Yeah, amazing. I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. That's one of those stories I think I'm going to go forward and tell other people. That's a feel good. That's a feel good one. So of course, as you mentioned, you transitioned out of that. I guess what were the most consequential like turning points or moments of clarity that really propelled you to take your next steps in your career and join NetSuite after that?
Yeah. Well, one, every time I worked, so I would advise hiring managers and their recruiters or talent advisors, as we call them, on how to bring in veterans into the organization.
Right.
And it's sometimes it's really difficult, and it's an abstract argument, or not argument, but it's an abstract concept to communicate to a hiring manager, because you're trying to tell someone who may or may not have, generally does not have a very deep familiarity with the military, to bring in an unknown quantity from a skill set standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also doing it because the fact that, we're serving a compliance need. Any organization that does more than $100,000 worth of business with the government needs to show a good faith effort into promoting and recruiting, its citizens that look like them, and veterans are included in that. So, so some people, they may feel as if like you're pressing upon them or taking away their agency from a decision making standpoint. And I never did that. I was merely just advising. Mm-hmm. But I worked with someone who was running the Solution Consulting Academy, and it was Meredith Hart. And she told me a story about her brother, and how her brother's a Navy veteran. He's a Navy EOD technician. And she was really just an ally and an advocate for the vision that I was trying to convey. And I also saw the impact that our organization, as a Solution Consulting Academy, had on all of NetSuite. As the primary vehicle that brought in SCs to the organization. So for those of you that don't know, solution consultants, those are the ones who they're the ones who solve the business case and demo the product for our customers. I would argue that they're incredibly important because they're very integral to the sales cycle, but also just communicating and showing the value to our organizations so that we can help them grow. And she was such an ally and such a partner in what I was trying to do. Like, one, I said, I need to figure out how I'm going to work for her.
I love that.
And then also just in passing in a meeting, she mentioned that she was an SC manager short. I was like, hey, I was an SC. I was a pretty good SC for a few years. Mm-hmm. And I know what it takes to be a successful SC, and also know how to train people. We had a conversation. I flew up to Burlington to interview forward with her team. And I then moved from Chicago to Austin in June of 2019 to run the Solution Consulting Academy in Austin, Texas, and transition over to the NetSuite side.
Wow. Again, great story. And I love that you tied that in, because I was like, oh, bell went off in my head. He was an SC for Oracle when he first came on. And now, you did the veterans program, you headed that up. And then now this was another way to bring in talent, which kind of gets my next question. And that is, how did D&I remain core to managing the Solution Consultant Academy? Like, how did you maintain that? Even though you were no longer like technically in a D&I like role?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about intentionality, and it's everyone's responsibility, whether you're a hiring manager or individual contributor. And I learned about intentionality when I was in business school, when I was in my DE&I class. And we talked about, intentionality, not just from a DEI standpoint, but intentionality as a values-driven leader, or intentionality like in other aspects, and how that affects output. So, being a hiring manager, I argue, has the best and most direct impact on the organization, especially in the middle experience and middle management ranks, because that's when we start to see people like move up to become executives or principals and seniors, et cetera. I was just I was very intentional and deliberate, and used that as a pillar to making any business decision I had to make on behalf of the organization.
That's great. I love that. I actually wrote that note down, intentionality. Can you, if you could like define intentionality, how would you?
Um, Ooh, no one's ever asked me that question.
I know.
So because I'm an SC, I speak in metaphors. When I think about intentionality and I think about doing things, I think about always thinking, how is this going to impact who I'm serving positively? So for example, sometimes when I log off and go after my last Zoom call, I'm really tired. And the kids are they really, really want to play with me. Sometimes it's just like, I need a moment. But I know that if I'm an intentional father and I play with them, even if it's just for 10, 15 minutes, that's going to have such a positive and lasting impact, as opposed to me doing something that is non-consequential. And so, I think, I guess to answer your question, to be intentional is to always be thinking about it and always figure out how I'm going to incorporate that positive value into my decision-making process.
Right. Well, and like it even for me, like when I hear that, when you use that metaphor with your kids, like it's every action has a reaction. So if you're doing something that's like if you just looked at your kid and said, not right now, I'm going to go sit on the couch, that has, probably a negative impact. So, so that makes that's a great metaphor. So, I love that.
Yeah. And if I could just add, so for example, when we're interviewing people, we don't hire everyone that we interview, but I want to make sure that candidate experience is respectful and positive and also good and fun, because that's why we get people coming back after they've interviewed for us like multiple times. There are people that I hired for the Solution Consulting Academy. I've applied 2 or 3 times, but their experience with the organization and with me has been so positive. And I encourage them to come back after they've reached like certain, personal growth goals and they're ready to come aboard.
Does your business have trouble managing inventory, projects, or even getting paid on time? Don't let spreadsheets and QuickBooks hold you back. If you want to get your business to a better place, take action now and make the move to NetSuite. Stop paying for multiple systems that don't give you the information you need when you need it. Ditch the spreadsheets and all the old software you've outgrown. Now is the time to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you visibility and control over your financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. Everything you need, all in one place, instantaneously. Whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in revenue, save time and money with NetSuite.
Join the over 24,000 companies using NetSuite right now. Let NetSuite show you how they'll benefit your business with a free product tour at netsuite.com/business. Schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/business. netsuite.com/business.
Well, we've made our way through your kind of career journey thus far, especially here at Oracle and at NetSuite. And that brings me to your new role. So let's talk about, you are the director of the NetSuite Business Accelerator. You came up with the idea for it. So first, before we kind of get into the background of that, what is the NetSuite Business Accelerator?
Yeah, I wish you could see me smiling right now. The NetSuite Accelerator is a program that is designed to help startups grow. And it uses incubators across the country where startups are housed. And we use the incubators as a market mechanism to be as effective as possible in reaching the most startups as we can. And because those incubators validate the startups, like their business model, they give them access to funding, and they already have a runway. And so then we, as NetSuite, what we do is we come in and we communicate the value of NetSuite. We tell the NetSuite story, and how the reason why we have such a startup culture is because our leader, Evan, he founded NetSuite, and
he was an entrepreneur.
Yeah, he was an entrepreneur. That story is really impactful and powerful. But then also what's really impactful and powerful is our product. We're a core financials platform first and foremost. And a lot of these startups they're just on Excel, or they're using products that don't give them visibility into their overall organization, especially from a cash management standpoint. And so, but the focus right now of the accelerator is to help enable and grow diverse communities on our platform. And we just launched the Black Business Accelerator yesterday on February 10th.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I know, just for everybody, because we had this conversation before we actually hit record, but George has had a very long last few days, but also very long last few months getting this all going. So George, again, I appreciate you coming on and doing this podcast with us after on a Friday, nevertheless, after what's been a really crazy, exciting, I know, probably crazy, emotional, amazing week. I appreciate you joining us. But that is so, you talked about our product. You kind of hit on Evan's own entrepreneurial story, but I want to just drive this point home. How does the Business Accelerator, the Accelerator, align with NetSuite's core vision and mission, like from day one?
Yeah. So NetSuite's core vision and mission is businesses will succeed if they have visibility and access to all the information that they need. Right. Now, communities that we're targeting and communities that we're enabling, cultivating, and accelerating their growth, they are vitally important to the economy, to the overall ecosystem. And when I was thinking about, right, because I'm being intentional from a DE&I standpoint, and I was thinking externally, how can we help? What tools do I have at my disposal so that we can cultivate a market and help it grow? And I thought about NetSuite as a product, and I thought about the people in our organization and how talented they are, and I figured out a model to help position them to both help these markets grow, and help them grow on our platform.
I mean, and that actually brings me to, what are some statistics you've thought about this? Like you said, I love that you brought it back to intentionality, but what are some statistics around entrepreneurs and startups from diverse communities that really kind of, again, just like made that light bulb go off for you even more?
Yeah. So, I mean, I geek out hard and listen to Freakonomics and Planet Money and a lot of business and finance podcasts because my background's is in finance. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I heard and I did a little bit more research on was in the last, since 2020, more Black businesses have become and grown than in the last quarter century. Wow. And so there's this phenomenal growth that's happening. And there's this phenomenal entrepreneurial surge that's happening. Mm-hmm. And so when you think of DE&I, and the core reason why we have DE&I initiatives is because the value of these communities, right? The communities in which I occupy, I want someone to see and value me. And I want to make sure that I have all the tools that I need to navigate any problems that I have, or to navigate any barriers that I would have if I was growing a business.
And what better company to do it than NetSuite, with tens of thousands of customers all over the globe who we've helped in every industry, of every size, build, and grow through those challenges like you're talking about.
Exactly. And if the idea is that if NetSuite can become synonymous with Black startups and growing Black wealth, how powerful of a message is that going to be? And also highlight the tool and the overall market value of our tool. But then, just personally, it would just make me incredibly proud that we've helped contribute so much to the economy and to these communities that we already serve. Right.
And so we're starting with Black businesses, but how is that going to evolve over time?
Yeah. So every community is different, and every community is valuable. And every community faces certain specific challenges that can impede their growth, right? So when you think about intentionality and you think about different communities, the NetSuite Accelerator is the overall organization that just launched the Black Business Accelerator. Now we're going to launch a Latinx Accelerator, a Women's Business Accelerator, a Disabled Business Accelerator, and a Veterans Business Accelerator. Right? Because each of these communities are vitally important, and NetSuite is well positioned to help cultivate, accelerate, and enable their growth.
Amazing. That's great. Again, just I'm so excited to see how this all evolves. Going back to kind of who fits this mold, if you will, how are we going about finding the right businesses for this program? How do we identify them? What data are we looking at?
Yeah, and so that's why the incubators are so important,
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, so the incubators, they're not just an important market mechanism. When you talk about intentionality of DEI, our physical footprint as a tech company is huge. And we live in these spaces from Austin, Texas to Chicago to Nashville, Santa Monica, Denver. And the incubators are rooted in the communities that we hire from, but also in the communities that we serve. And because these businesses live in these areas, right? These businesses are domiciled there. And so the incubators, they do a few things. They help us be as efficient as possible in cultivating the growth of the communities that we're trying to do, or that we're trying to serve and grow on our platform. But also they serve as a community engagement model because we don't want to do anything alone. We have, like, NetSuite has over 1,000 partners for our platform. I look at incubators and the external partnerships that we have, just like the partnerships for our platform. And they provide us access and the ability to be that much more efficient and solve the most dynamic market problems.
Right. What are we actually going to do, NetSuite, to support these businesses in achieving sustainable growth? What are the things we're offering?
Yeah, so we're offering we're offering discounted access to our software. We're offering mentorships with our leadership, right? We talked about Evan's story and how Evan was an entrepreneur, but so access to mentorships with Evan, mentorships with our executive staff. We're also offering them different entitlements that come along with it. The last thing you want to do is just give someone your technology or give them access to your technology and then just walk away. We're going to help enable them, show them how to use it in order to help them grow. And
how do you think, you talked about obviously our leadership, and Evan has his own entrepreneurial story. We have entrepreneurs within NetSuite who've all started, whether it's an app or whatever, who are also working at NetSuite. We have a huge network of customers and partners paired with the benefit of our technology. Like, really, how do you see this being successful? Like, how do you see all of that coming together? And I guess, how are we measuring the success?
Well, we're measuring positive impacts in the DEI space by the amount of simply by the amount of revenues that these companies generate on our platform. If I can, I'm sorry about that's my dog. So if I can create,
we all are working from home, so we totally get it.
Yeah. So if I can create if I can help a business or an organization gain visibility into, let's say they're trying to react to changing market conditions, they need to do a what if analysis, and they can't do that efficiently on like Excel, right? So they do that, they pivot, they grow, and they have revenues and they grow. And just think about the amount of like wealth generation that Black-owned business has. They grow and they hire more people, and then they tell other people about NetSuite and they help them grow. And then, so that growth is compounded. What I like here is that we're always trying to figure out as an industry, as a society, how can we measure positive growth when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion? And so now we can measure that growth strictly in terms of business success. That's something I'm very, very comfortable with analyzing.
I love that. I mean, so I guess kind of stemming off of that, when you think about the future, when you look ahead, let's say 5-10 years, what does overall, I mean, not just talking an individual businesses, but what does overall success look like for this program?
Oh, that's
I know. You could take a sec if you need.
I think overall success for the program would be, remember that story we talked about, that veteran I hired, Adam? If we can help a handful of businesses grow parallel to how his career grew, I think the program would be successful. Yeah, I think the program, like overall long-term success looks like sustained intentionality of serving the communities and the spaces that we operate in. This isn't a one-off, and it's not one of those decisions that wasn't thought about and vetted deeply. NetSuite's always been doing this. And this is just more of a strategic focus and a realignment to cultivate a particular market that has grown cultivate particular markets that have grown so much in the past year. That's what overall success looks like. The continued
Yeah.
intentionality and cultivation of our core vision and our core values, which is helping diverse communities grow on NetSuite.
Absolutely. And that it's so funny, not funny, but when I was thinking about this and thinking about asking you that question just now, I was like, in my head, it means exactly what you said, sustained intentionality. And I'm so glad you said this, because this is the first time I've actually really heard of intentionality and learned about it. So I love that. And I hope all of our listeners take away, take that away from this episode, because I think we could all benefit from really focusing on intentionality. George, I can't believe it, but we're already coming to the end here. I guess my last question, unless there's anything else you want to add, is how can businesses get involved with the NetSuite Accelerator? Who can they reach out to?
Well, they can reach out to me.
There you go. Follow George on LinkedIn. I'll add I'll add your LinkedIn link in the description of this episode. You can also go to netsuite.com/accelerator. On that page, there's a link, and I have access to that as well. You can reach out to me there. Great.
But then also, if you already have a contact at NetSuite, if they haven't heard about this, they'll be hearing about this soon. You can definitely reach out to them and ask them for more information as well.
Amazing. Well, George, this has been great. I'm so excited. I know I congratulated you. I've congratulated you a couple times now, but congrats again. This is huge. What an accomplishment. Just your career path in general. You inspire a lot of people, whether you know it or not. Yeah, you inspire me a lot. And even the people within my organization have talked about it. So keep doing what you're doing. And I'm so excited to see how this accelerator continues to spread the NetSuite vision and continues to help businesses grow and succeed. So thank you.
Thank you, Kendall.
I don't know about you, but I came out of this episode with some serious notes, especially around intentionality. Love that. Now, I've included a link for more information about the accelerator in the description of this episode, so go ahead and check that out. I also want to thank George Ploss for joining us and sharing the story behind the accelerator launch, as well as what's to come. Very exciting stuff. I also want to shout out to our editing crew over at Lampstand, and as always, all of you for tuning in. If you have a chance, give us a rating, review, and subscribe to our channel. Looking forward to chatting next time. Bye.
You just listened to the NetSuite podcast. Be sure to tune in every week with more NetSuite developments, stories, and insights into the benefits of one integrated system to help you run your business.